Previously on Birds of the Air Travel, we're going to stay on an uninhabited island tonight. Here in Chuuk, the main underwater attraction is a graveyard of Japanese warships that were sunk during World War II. Our flight to Guam got delayed by about 6 hours, so we are going to miss our connecting flight to Palau. We're stuck in a mobile in Guam. It's a day later than we expected, but we are finally in Palau. We checked into our hotel, which was just empty last night without us. We only got 4 hours of sleep last night, so Vince is done. Outside, it has been raining extremely hard on and off. We will see what tomorrow's weather brings. It's almost time for me and Vince's first day of diving in Palau. We're meeting up with our friends Lars and Sebastian, who we met in Majuro. I'm excited. It's still kind of raining, but it looks like the weather's gonna be better than it has been. And yeah, I can barely contain myself. I can't wait. A van from our dive shop, Blue Marlin, came to pick me and Vince up from our hotel, and before long we had collected all of our gear and embarked on a very rainy boat ride out to Oolong Island. We rolled into the water at a dive site called Grassland. This was an easy dive, which is pretty standard for a first dive out with a new dive shop. Later in the day we got to experience some of the strong currents that Palau is famous for, but for now we got to take it easy, cruising along a protective reef and looking for interesting fish. One of the coolest parts of this dive site was something that I actually couldn't get footage of, but we dropped down to the sandy bottom and watched little garden eels peeking up from their holes in the sand. There were hundreds of them, and they looked like a field of seagrass swaying in the water. Soon we resurfaced for our first surface interval of the day. Meanwhile, Rachel and Jared were off on their own adventure. They don't dive, so they went on a half-day kayak tour where they got to explore some of the islands and caves near Koror. They even got to snorkel at a World War II plane wreck. And just when they were getting hungry, they met some people who offered them oysters they'd just caught.
Oyster! Fresh oyster over there.
With lemon? Yeah. That is so good.
Really?
Oh my god. Oh my god, that's huge.
Ooh, I like it. What was the name again of that? Sochu. And it's plum. Ooh, I love plum.
They kayaked along towering cliffs and through more caves. Bats flew around their boats as they weaved through spectacular stalactites hanging from the cave ceiling. Then they got to stop on an island and take a short hike to see a yap coin and another cave with crystalline limestone stalactites.
It's a good limestone.
Back at Oolong, we just started our second dive at a site called Shark City. Our goal on this dive was to find a school of snappers while being mindful of the site's strong currents. We found the snappers right away. They would have been pretty hard to miss since there were so many of them. We were there just a few days before the snappers' monthly spawning event, but it seemed that the fish were already aggregating anyway. It was challenging to stay with the fish while we were watching them because the current at Shark City was pretty strong. We followed our dive master Tommy, alternating between swimming against and floating with the current. After watching the snappers for a while, we broke away from the school to follow a large group of barracudas. We also came across some bumphead parrotfish. This is one of my favorite fish species. It's hard to tell without a human reference in frame, but bumpheads are actually quite large. They can grow up to 5 feet long and weigh up to 165 pounds. We stuck by the school of barracudas for the rest of the dive, which was fine by me because barracudas are another one of my favorite fish species. I love the way they catch the light and look like they're shimmering when they're in big groups like this. We finished up the dive and got back on the boat for a bento box lunch. Our final dive of the day was at Size Corner, which is a very famous site known for large schools of fish, turtles, and sharks. It's also known for having a strong current, and Tommy mentioned that we may have to use our reef hooks if we encountered anything we wanted to stop to watch. It turned out that the current wasn't especially strong that day, so we never pulled out our hooks and instead drifted along the edge of a steep drop as schools of beautiful fish surrounded us. We saw more barracudas, more snappers, another bumphead parrotfish, and a school of jacks. But the huge schools of fusiliers really stole the show on this dive. I loved seeing them all move in tandem like one giant organism. After the dive, we rode back to Koror and went out to dinner with Lars, Sebastian, and George, who we'd met back in the Marshall Islands. We enjoyed a stunning sunset while we ate, and then we went back to the hotel to get some rest. Today is going to be me and Vince's last day of diving of the trip, and we're pretty geeked because it's actually kind of sunny out today. We should get some better colors down underwater. Yesterday was so good even when it was rainy. We really can't wait for today. I can't even begin to explain how good it felt to see the sunshine as we rode out into the Rock Islands again. No more shivering in our neoprene hoodies. Instead, we basked in the sunlight and beautiful views, passing by rounded top islands that rose from turquoise waters. Sunny skies also meant that the visibility underwater should be better that day, and I was so excited when we rolled into the sea at one of Palau's most famous dive sites, the Blue Holes. This was an aptly named site because the main attraction is to swim through giant holes in the seabed and into an underwater cavern. Inside, light filtered in through the eponymous holes, creating an ethereal atmosphere. This was also me and Vince's 50th dive, and it was a really cool spot to mark the occasion. We explored the cavern for about half of the dive, then re-emerged onto the reef. Visibility was greatly improved from the previous day. The reef itself looked really beautiful, and the colors of the reef fish shone much more brightly. We saw a leopard sweetlips, some squirrelfish and common snappers, and a blotched fairy basslet and some other anthias. It became really obvious that this was a popular dive site when we did our safety stop and saw that we were surrounded by plumes of bubbles from all the other divers that were still below us. Nice! Holy cow! Next up was the dive site that I'd been most looking forward to. The Blue Corner is widely considered to be one of the best dive sites in Palau, and I was really excited to see if it lived up to its reputation. The dive started out really strong. We started seeing sharks as soon as we descended to our bottom depth of around 20 meters, and then Tommy signaled for us to take out our reef hooks. I hooked mine into a rock and then inflated my BCD and relaxed to enjoy the show. Dozens of sharks glided in front of us as we floated in place. The really nice thing about reef hooking is that your air lasts a lot longer when you aren't moving very much. I ended up surfacing with 110 bar left in my tank after 50 minutes underwater. That's definitely a new personal record for me. While Vince and I were appreciating the beauty of all the fish that surrounded us, Jared and Rachel were out trying to catch some to eat for dinner. But eating fish is not my thing. I'd much rather see them alive in their natural habitat. And back at the blue corner, we'd unhooked from the reef and were now searching for more amazing species away from the drop-off. We found more barracuda and another bumphead parrotfish. Then I spotted a Titan triggerfish, Moorish idol, 6-bar angelfish, scrawled filefish, and blue-faced angelfish all in one place. Finally, I got a close encounter with one of the main species I'd been hoping to find on this dive, a Napoleon wrasse. At the last minute, we came across a couple of oriental sweetlips and a school of blue striped snappers. Then it was time to return to the surface and eat lunch. Blacktip reef sharks circled our boat as we ate, which got me all the more excited to jump back in the water at the German Channel. The German Channel was artificially carved out of the reef when Palau was a German colony. The dive site is a cleaning station for manta rays, and we saw a ray right at the beginning of the dive. After that, the dive was full of smaller, although still beautiful fish. We saw a moray eel, a lionfish, and more leopard sweetlips. Then we got to see one last school of barracuda before returning to the surface for the last time. Rainbows shined in the sky as we boated back to Koror, where we celebrated me and Vince's 50th dive.
50! Congratulations!
That was truly a perfect day of diving. I'm gonna remember that as one of the best diving days I've ever had. We went to the 3 most famous dive sites in Palau: the Blue Holes, the Blue Corner, and the German Channel. Nothing could beat the Blue Corner. We got to use reef hooks for the first time, so we found a rock, hooked it with our reef hook, and inflated our BCDs a little so we could just float while the current held us in the water like a kite, basically. And then as we were doing this, we just watched, and right in front of us, there was a drop-off, and there were just sharks circling. I think I counted 8 at once at one point. Diving in Palau is kind of expensive, but I would say well worth it for world-class diving. Some of the best diving I've ever done, probably some of the best diving I'll ever do. That evening, we met up with Rachel and Jared, who had a bag of fish that they had caught, and we went to a nearby restaurant called Tori Tori to have them prepared. Everyone really enjoyed the fish, and the presentation was beautiful. But as I said, I don't eat fish, so I ordered vegetable tempura, which was also delicious. On our way back to the hotel, we ran into Lars, George, and Sebastian and said goodbye to them since they were all leaving Palau soon. Then we crashed into bed, exhausted from a long day of activity. Okay, I'm back in front of the boring white wall to update that we are going on a kayaking tour in the Rock Islands today. We're going with a company called Paddling Palau, and I'm really excited to get out there and get closer to some of the islands. Diving has been amazing, but now I'm excited to see some of what the land has to offer in Palau. Our guide, Finn, picked us up from the hotel and drove us to Paddling Palau's headquarters for a quick briefing about what we'd be doing that day. Then we started boating towards our destination, Risong Bay. Zooming through the Rock Islands was a dream come true. The 4 of us have been talking about doing this trip for about 8 years, so it was really exciting to all be reunited after a couple of days apart. We arrived in the Risong Bay area and got into our kayaks. We paddled through a rock tunnel and into a picturesque bay. Eerie bird calls filled the air as we paddled through the green waters, and soon Finn pointed out some jellyfish floating below our boats. He said we would have the chance to get out and swim with them soon. First, we stopped to look for juvenile blacktip reef sharks at a known shark nursery, but we had no luck. Then we floated into a cave that sometimes has crocodiles inside of it. Then Finn found a spot with lots of jellies, and we pulled on our snorkel gear and jumped into the water. One of Palau's biggest attractions is Jellyfish Lake, a saltwater lake where stingless golden jellyfish live in relative safety from predators. More on that later. The lake used to be home to millions of golden jellies, but a La Niña in 2019 made the water too warm for them, and they reproduced in much smaller numbers than usual. Because the jellyfish lake wouldn't have many golden jellies, Finn made sure that we got a chance to swim with one of their relatives. These are Mystigius papuas. They're also stingless, so they're safe to swim with. They're a lagoon-dwelling species with a range that extends throughout the Indo-Pacific. Swimming with jellyfish without having to stress about getting stung was a lot of fun. Finn let us swim and dive around with them for as long as we wanted, then we got back into our kayaks and paddled out of the bay. We met back up with our captain Artie and had lunch on the boat while floating in a peaceful lagoon. After lunch, it was time to get back in the water. We came across a World War II shipwreck, and Finn taught us about the Battle of Palau, which lasted from September to November of 1944. Then we paddled around the islands until we reached a protected bay known as Mandarin Fish Lake. This area is fed by a natural spring, and at low tide, sediment is washed out into the ocean, leaving behind crystal clear water that's shallow and makes for an excellent spot to snorkel. As the lake's name would suggest, this is one of the best places in Palau to spot the elusive mandarin fish. That was our mission when we slipped into the water with our snorkel gear. We were also looking for pajama cardinalfish, but we ended up seeing so much more than just the two species we were looking for. Visibility was as good as it gets, so we could see everything as we hovered over the reef. Jared found a whitetail stingray while I explored some tree roots at the edge of the water. I found this adorable flatworm and watched it swim for a while. There were lots of giant clams in the lake, and each one had unique color patterns. I was elated when I found a group of pajama cardinalfish. They really are so pretty with their bright spotted pattern. This crown of thorns starfish was really cool, but their spikes are quite venomous, so I made sure to stay a safe distance away. Rachel managed to spot a mandarin fish towards the end of our time in the lake. This is one of the most colorful fish I've ever seen. It was so pretty, and we were all super happy to have found one. After that, it was time to head back in the direction of Koror, but we did stop at one more spot for a drift snorkel along the way. Then we went back to town for the night, but we still had one more day with paddling Palau to look forward to. All right, very sadly, this is our last day in Palau. I really wish we could stay longer than this, but we gotta head home. But thankfully, we're not done yet. We have one more tour today with Paddling Palau and our guide Finn from yesterday. Yesterday's tour was so amazing, so we're really excited to head out again. Today, we're gonna go to the iconic Jellyfish Lake. We're not gonna see millions of jellies like you see in pictures online from before 2019, but we should be able to find some jellies still. They are making a comeback, and then we're gonna be snorkeling around some other neat areas in the Rock Islands, and we're all very excited to get started. Finn gave us another briefing about what to expect for the day, and then we were off. This time we had a much longer boat ride to get out to some of the more remote islands that were further away from Koror. Along the way, we passed by lots of beautiful scenery, and RD expertly captained the boat around tight turns as we weaved in and out of the Rock Islands. We made a quick stop at a huge limestone arch and got off the boat to pose underneath it. Then we continued our journey southward, stopping again to check out some ancient Palauan pictographs. We finally arrived at our first snorkeling spot for the day, the fishbowl. We jumped into the water in the midst of a group of yellowtail fusiliers and sergeant majors. We swam through the crowd to a shallow reef where Rachel immediately spotted a hawksbill turtle and called the rest of us over to see it. The corals at this reef were really beautiful, and there were lots of different kinds of reef fish swimming around. I came across a large rock that was covered in clams. Suddenly, Vince swam up to show me that about a dozen little fish had started following him around everywhere he went. These are juvenile golden trevally. They swim near larger animals like turtles and sharks for protection, and apparently they had decided to make Vince their new home. I found a neat giant clam and some juvenile bumphead parrotfish. Then we came across a spot with a lot of clownfish and anemones. The clownfish were acting a little extra aggressive, and we found out why when Finn noticed that they were protecting their babies. Vince's fish posse still clung to him, hiding behind him whenever I approached. I felt like I couldn't hang out with my husband because his fish didn't like me. We also got to see a bunch of these shiny orbs in the reef, which are actually an algae, and they're the world's largest single-celled organism. At the end of the snorkel session, Vince had to abandon his fish posse. They freaked out. Hopefully they found a nice turtle to hide under after this. After another short boat ride, it was time to swim in Jellyfish Lake. It's Jellyfish Lake time! We had to take a hike uphill through the forest to get there. World famous Jellyfish Lake is behind me right now. If it were like a few years ago when there were a lot of jellies here, there would probably be about 400 people here right now. But since the jellies are less populated than they used to be, it's only the four of us here for the time being. Who knows, some more people may show up. Hopefully we will actually see some jellies. We're gonna give it our best try. The first thing we saw on the lake were these orbiculate cardinalfish. These guys have no natural predators in the lake, so they aren't shy at all around people. We swam out to the sunniest spot in the lake to look for the golden jellies. These jellies are in a symbiotic relationship with a single-celled algae called zooxanthellae. The jellies provide a home for the zooxanthellae, and the zooxanthellae provide nutrition for the jellies. Zooxanthellae photosynthesize, which is why the jellyfish can be found in the sunniest parts of the lake at any given time of the day. Golden jellies prefer cooler water than many other jellyfish species, so when the La Niña hit Palau in 2019, the jellies didn't reproduce, resulting in a dramatic drop in their numbers. Golden jellies can reproduce by two means, either asexually by budding off of polyps that are affixed to the lake's walls, or sexually when mature medusas produce larvae. These larvae swim to the edge of the lake where they attach and become polyps. When the water gets too warm, the polyps won't produce more medusas, although they remain dormant attached to the lake edges. Recently, they've started to make a slow comeback, but the lake now has a lot more moon jellies, which thrive in warmer water. Finn showed us these little anemones attached to mangrove roots and explained that these anemones feed on the jellyfish. We got lots of time to swim in the lake, and although we mostly saw moon jellies, I was really happy that we saw some golden jellies as well, since this particular subspecies of Mystigius papua is found only in the marine lakes of Palau. After we left Jellyfish Lake, we made a quick stop to see a yap coin in the forest. These giant coins were harvested by the Yappies, who didn't have crystalline limestone on their own island in present-day FSM. So they traveled 300 miles by outrigger canoe to carve these stones from their quarries in Palau. After the stones were carved, they brought them back to Yap by canoe to be used as currency. By the time we left the Yap coin, everyone had worked up an appetite, so we boated over to another island for lunch. We just stopped for a quick lunch at this beautiful beach that was actually a filming location for Survivor. It was Jared's birthday, and since we'd be crossing the international date line the next day, he'd get to have his birthday 2 days in a row. So we called the lunch his first birthday celebration. Happy birthday to you. After exploring the island for a little bit, it was time for another snorkel. This spot is called Blacktip Beach because the reef sharks around the area are habituated to boats and will swim right up when they hear one approaching. So when we dropped into the water amidst another school of yellowtail fusiliers, we weren't surprised to see a handful of blacktip reef sharks among them. After a while, the sharks lost interest in us and returned to deeper water, so we got back onto the boat and rowed a short distance to one last snorkel spot. This was another drift snorkel over a patch reef that had beautiful patches of purple staghorn coral. All too soon, it was time to get back in the boat and make our final ride back to Koror. We arrived at Paddling Palau, all talking excitedly about the amazing things we'd seen that day. That was an extra incredible day, and what a great ending to a really fun trip. I'd love to stay here for like the rest of my life, to be honest. This was just a really wonderful day tour, and we couldn't have asked for a better memory to leave on. After dreaming of visiting Palau for so long and hyping it up so much in my mind, it was astonishing to finally go there and realize that it was even more amazing than I could have imagined. The biodiversity in the waters surrounding the rock islands is unparalleled, and the care taken to nurture the environment is evident everywhere you look. I feel so lucky to have had the chance to visit what I would consider one of the most beautiful places on Earth, and to see so many of the wonderful creatures that call its waters home. Happy birthday! First out of 2 days birthday, Jared!